With a few notable exceptions that get all of the money, most podcasters aren't paid by the download. For us, which is probably you, the intangible benefits of podcasting are the most important thing. So how do you track those? Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Ooh, intangibles. How do you track an intangible? Unmeasurable metrics. What's happening here? Fun stuff. Scary stuff. Complicated stuff. Well, not complicated. It's just fuzzy. It's a little blurry, but that's okay sometimes. When you think about intangibles are things which you, by definition, can't track. They're wispy. They're cloud-like. They're kind of hard to wrap your hands around them. But as I said, for most of us podcasters, they are the most important thing. The intangible benefits you get from your podcast are likely the most important thing that you can do as a podcaster. Whether you have one podcast or help dozens of podcasts, it's the intangible benefits that really are important. And I think, in a spirit of brevity, I can make this fairly simple to understand. Fairly simple by talking about two different intangibles that you need to be tracing, tracking, understanding, as easily or complicated as that might be. They are reputation and resource. Reputation and resource. Now let's talk about what I mean by that, because they're very different things. And I'm going to talk about them in reverse. Let's talk about the resource aspect first. Here I'm talking about your content and how others perceive your content as resourceful or not. Is the content you produce referenced by people after you produce it? Is it seen as a resource? That can be a resource for how-to type information, where people refer back to that again. It can be a resource that they refer out to other people. Hey, I just saw that you had this problem, Jane. Here's how podcaster A checked it out and solved that problem. They share that around. That's a resource that is shared. But resources don't always mean that. I mean, a resource can be used as example. In a few weeks, less than a week, well, just over 1 week, less than 2 weeks, I'm going to be giving a presentation at Outlier Podcast Festival, SLC, Salt Lake City. And I'm going to be referencing a lot of podcasts. Those will be resources, because when I think of these podcasts as examples of the things I'm talking about, I'm going to share what those are. Even if I don't currently listen to some of those podcasts. And in fact, some I don't. Some I just know about because they are a resource. I have internalized that as a resource for my brain. So what about you? Are you making the types of content on your show that other people, whether they are listeners or your peers, find as a resource? Good question. Are you doing that or not? Now, as I said, there were two things. The other one was resource, and what was the other one? Reputation. That's the important one. Reputation, even more intangible, but nonetheless still important for you to understand. And the reputation you have, like resource, is split amongst two groups. Reputation amongst your peers and reputation for your listeners. Now, obviously, the latter is easier. If you don't have a good reputation of your listeners, then you tend to not have very many listeners eventually, but still, you can look at some things to figure out if your reputation amongst listeners is good. Like if you get a bunch of new listeners all the time and you don't get a lot of old listeners and who are making comments, that sort of stuff, maybe your reputation amongst your listeners isn't great. But this is all on you. This is not the reputation of your content. This is not the reputation of the show or the shows you have for your episodes. This is your own reputation. Are you seen amongst these people, listeners or your peers, as someone with a good reputation? Now, I happen to, the industry of my peers who are podcasters also happen to be, like deeply into podcasting. That's my peer group. Your peer group is going to be the people who make the kinds of podcasts that you make, the kinds of podcast episodes that you make, the industry that you are in, the customers that you have. That's where your reputation matters to those peers. So my peers and your peers are quite different. But are you seen as someone with a good reputation in your peer group? Do you get invited to speak at events? Do people bring up your name in conversation when they're talking about, the industry that you happen to live in? Do you have a good reputation? Now, that's an easy thing to either have or not have. You can waste it away pretty quickly. But one of the mistakes I see a lot of people who are podcasters make, especially in my peer group, is they are so focused on making sure that their content is seen as a good resource, they neglect to build their own reputation. So much so that the person providing the content oftentimes disappears. I can't tell you the number of shows that I listen to where I don't know the name of the host, of the producer, of anyone involved. I don't. I know the name of the show. I know the content is good as a resource, but that person doesn't get any reputation points from me because, oftentimes they fail to say their name. They fail to say their name enough for me to get it. They fail to brand themselves as a part of it. Now, clearly the content needs to win out. I mean, look, I'm not going to listen to your show unless it's a good piece of content. So you need to find a way to make sure you're blending yourself in with that. And I don't have an easy way to tell you to do that other than, take a listen. Did you mention your name at the beginning of the show? Do you mention it in a way where it's easy to understand? Look, I don't come back and say Evo Terra 5 or 6 times during the middle of the show, but it's pretty prominent up front. My logo for my show has my name in it. The website I put together, I believe, talks about me enough. I'm pretty sure I've done a good job of self-branding so that my own reputation can stand on the resourceful content that I make. So those are the intangibles I want you to think about, and I want you to look at your own content and listen to your own content. Is it resourceful? And is it increasing your reputation? Those are the things that I want you to understand. I also want you to understand that you can go to ratethispodcast.com/podpunt and leave a nice review on whatever device you are using. It will customize the choices. It's a very cool service. ratethispodcast.com/podpunt. I also want you to buy me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/evoterra. It's a quick way to funnel a few bucks to this show because I don't run ads and you're probably, as a working podcaster, not in need of the services that I provide. But if you are in need of the services I provide, check out simplermedia.pro for a list of the services we offer to clients all around the world. Enjoy your Friday. I will be back on Monday with yet another Podcast Pontifications. Cheers.